Hello friends, Namaskar and welcome to our YouTube channel in Texas, the Tax Bites. Friends, today we will discuss the recent recommendations which have been made by the GST Council. This recent meeting wherein the GST rates on various goods have been slashed and the taxes have been rationalized. If you recall the night when the finance minister had given a press conference, somebody asked her how the government will ensure that the benefit of GST rate reduction have been passed on to the consumers. Then the Honorable Finance Minister mentioned that because of the competitive market which in India we have, the market forces would ensure that the GST benefit, the GST rate reduction benefit are duly being passed on to the ultimate consumers. So friends, as per the GST Council recommendation, there are 3 or 4 buckets wherein all such changes can be discussed. The first of the bucket would be the scenario wherein the GST rate has been reduced say from 28% to 18% and without any hindrance on the availability of ITC. So the supply of car, the motor vehicle, falls into that scenario, and this scenario can be further bifurcated into 2 parts wherein there is a B2B supply between a manufacturer and the dealer and a B2C supply between dealer and the consumer. As far as the first leg is concerned, the B2B supply between manufacturer and dealer, there was never an issue because the dealer was able to get the ITC or whatever GST that manufacturer has charged. However, coming to the second leg, the B2C between dealer and the consumer expectations and the right one, in fact, would be that the dealer should pass on the GST rate reduction benefit to them in terms of the valuation of the motor vehicle, and that is probably going to happen, and which is apparent from the various press briefings which have been given by various motor vehicle manufacturers. In the second category, there are certain supplies which were earlier subjected to GST but now have been made exempt. Now friends, as you are aware, since the inception or the reason for introduction of GST is the seamless tax credit allowance to a particular supplier of goods or services. Now in this case, since the ITC chain has been broken in terms of the inward material which is being made, which is being procured by such a supplier, are subjected to GST, but the outward supply, the goods manufactured by them, is not subjected to GST because these are exempt. An example in this direction can be the eraser. So in this case, since the ITC on the inward supply has become a sticking cost in the entire transaction of the supply chain, then such a manufacturer would be constrained to having not been passing on the entire benefit of the GST rate reduction on its outward supply, because the cost of production of such a supplier will increase to the extent of sticking ITC cost in the entire supply chain. So for this kind of item, we might not probably see the corresponding rate decrease in the value of goods corresponding to the GST rate reduction. In the third category, there are certain products which were earlier subjected to tax at the higher rate, but now the government has brought them into the lower GST rate of 5%, which resulted into the inverted tax structure. Now what has happened, some of the raw material, the major raw material in this sector, has been subjected to higher GST rate by abolishing the compensation cess, say for example coal, and simultaneously decreasing the GST on the outward supply. Now in this case, since the transaction is now inverted tax structure, so such a supplier would be required to file the refund claim as the inverted tax structure, and mind you, the refund of the accumulated unutilized ITC is available only on the net ITC pertaining to inputs. That is, the refund is not available of input services or capital goods in line with the Supreme Court judgment of VKC footsteps. So these were the 3 buckets wherein the changes have been felt by the trade as a whole. Now a common question arises out of the 3 scenarios is, what are the safeguards which are being inbuilt in the statute, the GST statute, which might or which may compel a person to pass on the benefit to the consumer in view of the GST rate reduction? So friends, I will take you back some 7-8 years back when the GST was introduced, and there was a very hype and the right noise was made around the anti-profiteering authority. As the name suggests, the anti-profiteering authority, the work of this authority was to ensure that the supplier should not profiteer or unwarranted profiteer from the GST rate reduction, not the GST rate reduction, but the benefit that they have got from transitioning from service tax or VAT regime to the GST regime. Because under GST, the services and the goods are subjected to GST, and under VAT and service tax, the goods were subjected to VAT and services were subjected to service tax, and there was no cross ITC between services and the service tax and the VAT. So the job of the anti-profiteering authority did its job. There were umpteen number of cases, especially from the perspective of the developer of the projects, like the flats and all that kind of stuff. Then there were certain FMCG cases also, which they have decided the matter and compelled that supplier to pass on the benefit to the consumer. Now coming to April 2025, the curtain were down on the anti-profiteering authority, and the government notified 31st of March 2025 as the last date when the anti-profiteering authority will entertain any case of profiteering on account of the GST rate reduction. So as of now, the scenario is anti-profiteering authority cannot entertain any new application. Now then the question is how this will be taken care of. The answer to that lie under section 171 of the CGST Act, which again pertains to anti-profiteering authority, wherein the subsection 1 mentions that a supplier will be required to reduce the prices or pass the benefit of any reduction in the GST to the consumers. So when in other words, the CGST Act 2017 has inherent powers or have inherent safeguards to ensure that the supplier should not be profiteer by themselves because of any GST rate reduction. Now so far so good. What will happen if a supplier doesn't reduce the rate, reduces its prices despite of GST rate reduction? Because presently anti-profiteering authority cannot accept any application on this account. The answer then will lie to under section 122 or 122, 126 and 125 of the CGST Act. Section 73 and 74, which deals with issuance of SCN, will not cover such a transaction because this governs or relates about the non-chargeability or short chargeability or the incorrect availability of taxes or the incorrect availability or taking the incorrect refunds. This is a case wherein the supplier has not reduced the prices of the outward product, in a way has not paid the short taxes but has contravened the section 171. So the correct course of action could be a proper officer would need to issue a notice to that person why he has not reduced the prices, and then the proper by imposing an appropriate penalty which is prescribed under the CGST Act on such a supplier, and then take a normal course of action like adjudicating the matter or not. The supplier would need to represent its case appropriately by demonstrating that its cost of production has increased, which has compelled such a supplier for not reducing the price in line of the GST rate reduction. Once that be the case, if an adverse order is passed by the adjudicating authority, since all the appeals now lie before the GST tribunal, the supplier would have adequate chance to present its case before the GST tribunal. But having said that, in looking at the past experience, how the experience of the field formation would be there in dealing with the anti-profiteering authority, it is desirable that the government should or could think of reviving the anti-profiteering provisions or anti-profiteering authority, so that the experience that such an authority gained during the nascency or during the initial period of the GST can now be replicated during this regime when a significant GST rate reduction has happened. So friends, I hope you would have found the discussion interesting and useful. Thank you.